What happens when a duchess walks into a Bravo studio expecting another smooth, friendly interview, only to be met by a host who isn't playing along? Tonight, Meghan Markle believed she had control. But Andy Cohen had different plans. What started as a relaxed, late-night chat quickly turned into one of the most intense interviews ever seen on television. The lights on the "Watch What Happens Live" set glowed brightly, bouncing off the glossy background as Andy Cohen casually shuffled his note cards. The vibe in the room was lively, but there was also a sense of curiosity in the air, like something unexpected was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Andy began with his familiar grin, "we've got a very special guest tonight. She's been making global headlines, and now she's here with us at Bravo. Please welcome the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle." The audience clapped, but the applause was polite, not as loud as it usually is for Bravo's top stars. Meghan stepped onto the set wearing a crisp black blazer and matching fitted pants. Her posture was perfect, her walk was calm, and her face was already set for the cameras. She gave a smile, but it was the kind that didn't quite shine through her eyes. "Andy," she said smoothly, shaking his hand before sitting down. "Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here." The word "thrilled" sounded like it came from a press release, not a real feeling. Andy noticed, and so did the viewers at home. He leaned back, swirling his signature cocktail with a casual air. "So, Meghan," he said, "let's start off easy. How's life in California? You and Harry seem to be settling in nicely." Meghan answered right away, her voice carrying a hint of edge. "Life's wonderful. We don't really settle, Andy. We create. We build things that matter." She paused. "That's what we've been doing in California, making something real, not just getting by." There was a quiet laugh from the crowd, though it didn't feel entirely friendly. Andy picked up on the cold undertone but let it slide. "That's great to hear. And how are you and Harry doing? You know the tabloids love their stories." Meghan's smile tightened, her voice growing sharper. "We're doing perfectly. Unlike what those papers invent daily, we actually have a strong marriage. Maybe people should stop wasting their time obsessing over what they can't understand." The audience shifted in their seats. Meghan's words were firm, maybe too firm. Andy kept his cool, nodding politely. Of course. But you know," he added, "people are curious. That's the cost of fame, right?" Meghan gave a soft laugh, cool in tone. "Curious is one thing. But let's not pretend that being curious gives people the right to cross lines. People think they're owed every detail about my marriage, my kids, my private life. It's ridiculous." Andy raised an eyebrow but kept his voice steady. "Fair point. But since you brought up the public, your father's been in the news again, saying he wants to see his grandkids. Any chance of fixing that relationship?" For the first time, Meghan's practiced smile slipped. Her jaw set tightly. "Andy, my father's been feeding lies to tabloids for years. He chose attention over his family. He had many chances to handle this privately and chose not to. That chapter is closed." Her tone was sharp, more like a final word than a reply. The audience murmured. Andy leaned forward a bit, staying calm in his tone. "So, no chance of him meeting Archie and Lilibet?" Her eyes flashed. "Why would I reward someone who betrayed me? Would you let someone who embarrassed you in public into your home, Andy?" "Exactly. Let's not pretend we're being innocent here." Her sudden firmness made the whole room quiet down. The air seemed colder. Andy kept his calm, refusing to meet her rising anger with any of his own. "I understand," he replied smoothly. "But some might argue that family ties are, well, special. Worth holding on to." Meghan snapped back, her tone sharper. "They can argue all they want. They didn't live my life. They didn't walk in my shoes. And I'm honestly done with people pretending they know what it's like to be me." Andy took a sip of his drink, a subtle smirk starting to form. He'd spotted something, a crack in Meghan's carefully polished presence. She was already on edge, defensive and ready to push back. And this was just the beginning. Sensing the tension, Andy decided to change direction a little. Let's shift to royal life. When you joined the royal family, you called it overwhelming. He paused. Some people might say you weren't really ready. Meghan let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Ready, Andy? How can anyone be ready for a centuries-old system that's completely out of touch? It's outdated, and honestly, it felt like I was suffocating. Still, I adjusted better than anyone could have expected. Her voice was calm, but there was pride in her tone, and everyone could hear it. Andy leaned in again, speaking gently. And yet, the British public didn't really embrace you. Why do you think that is? Meghan's lips pulled into something that looked like a smirk. Because I was different. Because I challenged their expectations. Because I wouldn't act the way they wanted. That's their issue, not mine. The audience gave a quiet gasp. Even Andy tilted his head, curious. He'd spoken to many celebrities, but few had shown up with this much cool confidence. As the cameras focused on Meghan's calm but sharper expression, Andy realized this was only part one, and already, things were off the rails. And there were plenty more questions left to come. The tension was just getting started. The commercial break was short, but it didn't ease the mood on set. Meghan tugged at her blazer with brisk, sharp movements, her face stiff as the countdown to return began. Across from her, Andy sipped casually from his cocktail glass, looking completely relaxed, as if nothing unusual had just happened. "Welcome back to Watch What Happens Live," Andy said cheerfully, flashing his signature grin, though his eyes now held a sharper glint. "We're here with Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. We were just talking about royal life. Let's take that a step further." The camera shifted to Meghan, her smile tight, hands folded neatly in her lap. Andy continued, "So Meghan, before the palace, the Netflix deals, all of this, you were an actress. Suits put you in the spotlight. From there, things really changed. Do you miss any of that, the grind of auditions, the hustle of Hollywood?" Meghan's reply was quick, nearly dismissive. "I don't miss any of it, Andy. I've moved past that. Acting was just a step, not where I was meant to stay. What I do now makes a bigger difference than playing a paralegal on a TV show ever could." Her words cut through the air, and the audience let out a soft gasp. Andy's eyebrows raised slightly. "Interesting," he said coolly. "Because a lot of your fans really loved you in that role. Some might say it laid the groundwork for everything else." Meghan gave a small, dry laugh. "With respect, Andy, my foundation is who I am, not the roles I've played. If people think a TV character defines me, that says more about them than about me." The tone in her voice wasn't just confident, it bordered on condescending. The audience shifted again, unsure whether to clap or stay silent. Andy stayed calm, not even blinking. "All right," he said smoothly. "Let's shift to your marriage. There's endless public interest. Harry and Meghan, at this point, you're a global brand. But with that comes rumors, stress, even distance. Are you and Harry as solid as you say?" Meghan's face hardened. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course we are. The rumors are just noise. We don't give them attention. It's actually funny that people think they know anything real about our relationship." Andy leaned in slightly, his voice steady but a little sharper now. "So there's no truth at all to reports that your relationship's under pressure? That the California lifestyle, constant media, and your projects haven't created any tension?" Meghan's smile returned, but it was ice cold this time. "Let me make this simple, Andy. We are stronger than ever. If people need to create stories to distract from their own lives, that's on them. Our reality is love, loyalty, and partnership. Period." Again, the audience murmured, but it wasn't applause. Just a hum of awkwardness that filled the air like a fog. Andy let the quiet linger before gently steering the conversation. Let's take it back to your time in the UK, he said carefully. The British public had mixed reactions to you. Some adored you. Others, not so much. How do you see it now? Meghan's eyes narrowed, just slightly. I see it for what it was, prejudice, plain and simple. People weren't ready for someone like me to challenge their old ways. They wanted someone soft, someone obedient. That's not me. And yes, some of the hate was rooted in racism. Let's not pretend otherwise. Her voice was steady but forceful. The studio went still. Andy kept his tone balanced. And yet, critics say it wasn't about race. It was about how you carried yourself. The choices you made. That maybe your attitude caused friction. Meghan's answer was swift and defensive. That's what people say when they don't want to admit bias. It wasn't about race, it was about her attitude. It's a neat excuse. I entered a centuries-old system, and they didn't know what to do with someone like me. So they blamed me. Andy's faint smirk returned. But do you think, just maybe, you hold any responsibility at all? Any reflection on how your approach may have added to the problem? Meghan leaned in, her tone calm but full of contempt. Responsibility for what? Being myself. For not bowing low enough, for not smiling on cue. Please. If being real is a crime, then I'm guilty. The audience gasped softly once more. Andy swirled his drink, the edge of his mouth twitching upward ever so slightly. He'd interviewed many famous figures, from political leaders to reality stars. But Meghan's pride and unwillingness to bend were starting to go beyond even Bravo's usual fireworks. Okay, Andy said lightly, but his eyes were locked onto hers. Last question in this segment. You've said a lot about leaving royal life to find privacy. But then there's Netflix, Spotify, best-selling books, Oprah. How do you respond to people who call that a contradiction? The word landed like a strike. Meghan's grip on the armrest tightened. Her smile flickered, then turned solid again. Contradiction? She repeated. No. It's called strategy. We control our story. We share what matters when it matters. That's not hypocrisy, it's survival. Her tone was razor-sharp now, and the audience could hear it. Andy gave a slow nod, setting his glass down. Well, strategy or not, it definitely keeps people talking. The crowd shifted again, the energy uneasy. Meghan had shown more than just confidence. She'd shown coldness, anger, even a bit of disdain. And Andy Cohen, ever composed, wasn't nearly finished. The storm was still forming. The Bravo set glowed with its usual bright, fun colors, but the mood in the room was anything but cheerful. Meghan crossed her legs tightly, her hands resting in her lap, her face holding a firm expression that dared Andy to push her again. Andy leaned casually against his desk, note cards in hand, that slight smirk still on his face. All right, he said in a smooth voice. Let's talk about one of the most talked about interviews in recent memory, your sit-down with Oprah. Millions watched. People couldn't stop talking. But since then, some of your statements have been questioned. Meghan's smile didn't change, but her jawline tightened slightly. I stand by every word we said in that interview. That was my truth, Andy. Every single word. Your truth, Andy repeated, swirling his glass slowly. It's a phrase you've used quite a bit. But here's the thing about truth, Meghan, it's usually just the truth. Not versions of it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you questioning whether I'm being honest? She asked. Andy didn't look away. I'm questioning the contradictions. For example, you told Oprah you and Harry were married 3 days before the public wedding in a private ceremony. But the Archbishop later said it wasn't a legal marriage. Just a private exchange of vows. Do you see how that could seem misleading? A quiet stillness settled over the audience. Meghan leaned forward, her voice sharp and clipped. What Harry and I shared privately was sacred. Whether or not the church calls it legal doesn't matter. What mattered was our bond, our commitment to one another. Andy nodded, but his polite smile carried a bit more steel this time. But that's not what you said to Oprah. You said we were married before the wedding. Millions believe that. And when the head of the church corrects the record, that's not a small detail. That's a big deal. Meghan's nostrils flared. You're twisting my words, she snapped. You sound just like the British press, eager to pull apart everything I say instead of focusing on what really happened to me. Andy raised a brow but didn't change his calm tone. Let's stick with your own words, then. In that same interview, you said your passport and keys were taken away. That you felt trapped. Yet records show you traveled, attended events, even vacationed. How does that fit together? There was a soft murmur from the audience. Meghan shifted in her chair, a crack forming in her calm surface. Do you know what it's like to live in a golden cage, Andy? She said, her voice lower but tense. Just because I was allowed out in public doesn't mean I was free. Every step was monitored. Every move watched. You wouldn't understand. Andy gave a short laugh, cold and quiet. Maybe not, he said. But I do understand when a story doesn't add up. You've described yourself as completely powerless in some interviews, then completely in control in others. People noticed that. Meghan's eyes flared with irritation. People notice what they want to notice. I don't have to explain every moment of my life to make it real. I told my story, and I will keep doing that, on my own terms. Her voice was rising now, her tone more rigid than ever. The audience could feel it. Andy leaned forward, his voice now softer, but more pointed. So when critics say you've monetized victimhood, Netflix, Spotify, Harry's book, is that just people failing to understand nuance too? The room went cold. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line. That accusation is beneath you, Andy. We build platforms to give voices to people who are ignored, to shine light on causes that matter. That's not monetizing. That's purpose. Andy didn't look away, gently swirling his drink. Purpose that happens to come with million-dollar deals, best-selling books, and polished PR campaigns. Quite the coincidence. Meghan leaned forward, her voice dripping with anger. Do you treat every guest who tries to make a difference this way? Or is it just me? Andy stayed still. I don't mock anyone, he said plainly. But I do believe in accountability. Especially from people who claim to stand for truth while using celebrity rules to do it. He leaned closer, voice firm now. The audience deserves the truth, Meghan. Not just your version of it. Gasps came from the crowd. Meghan sat back in her seat, her face flushed, hands gripping the arms of the chair. For the first time all night, her carefully polished appearance seemed to be slipping. Andy added quietly, maybe the problem isn't the tabloids, or the palace, or Hollywood. Maybe it's you. Meghan's eyes widened. Her face turned pale, then red with fury. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came at first. Meghan Markle, the Duchess who always seemed ready, always composed, was now visibly shaken. Andy took a slow sip of his drink and let the silence stretch out, letting the cameras capture every flicker of emotion on her face. The studio was frozen, the audience completely still. Everyone knew they were witnessing something rare. This was no longer just an interview. It was something much deeper. A moment of reckoning. And there was still more to come. As the show returned from another commercial break, Meghan sat upright in her chair, her body tense. Her face showed how hard she was trying to stay composed, her blazer perfectly straight, but her eyes burned with emotion. Across from her, Andy leaned back, calmly flipping through his notes with the steady hand of someone who knew he had the upper hand. So, Meghan, Andy said, his voice relaxed but direct. We've talked about your marriage, your Oprah interview, your past as an actress. Let's talk about something bigger. How people see you. A lot of folks out there feel like you've burned a lot of bridges. Your dad, your sister, palace staff, even old friends. Why do you think that keeps happening? Meghan's head turned toward him quickly, her tone sharp. Because people lie, Andy. They trade trust for a headline. They betray for a payday. It's not about me, it's them. Every time. Andy nodded slowly, spinning the ice in his glass. So you're saying all these broken relationships have nothing to do with you? The audience gave a collective surprise. Boo. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Her lips pressed tight. I won't sit here and be psychoanalyzed by someone who makes money off gossip. I've spent years trying to get away from toxic people and toxic places. Andy leaned in slightly, voice even but with an edge. Toxic people? Or people who don't go along with your story? Her face flushed instantly. That's offensive. And it's sexist. She snapped. Andy set his glass down with calm control. No, Meghan. This isn't sexism. It's called accountability. If you're blaming everyone else for all your problems, maybe it's time to take a look in the mirror. The room fell silent. Meghan gripped the chair arms, her knuckles turning white. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with anger. You don't know me, Andy. You have no idea what I've gone through. Andy's smirk dropped. His expression turned serious. I don't need to know you personally. All I need to do is look at the pattern. He leaned forward, his voice growing louder. You were a decent actress. Then you married into the most famous family in the world. And ever since, you've turned every complaint into a headline, every private moment into content. You've built your entire brand not on who you are, but on who you married. Meghan's breath caught. Her eyes widened. That is completely outrageous, she said, barely above a whisper. But Andy didn't stop. His voice grew firmer, echoing through the studio. You still call yourself a duchess, but you don't serve in the monarchy. You say you're independent, but you live off the benefits that title brought you. You wanted privacy, but you've done more interviews, podcasts, and documentaries than anyone else in that family. So tell me, Meghan, without Harry's last name, who exactly are you? Gasps filled the studio. Meghan's face crumbled for the first time. The confidence faded. Her eyes welled up with tears as she leaned forward. Her voice broke. How dare you? After everything I've been through, how dare you reduce me to just... Andy cut her off. His tone sliced through the tension. How dare you reduce everyone else, Kate, William, even the late Queen, to villains in your story so you can keep playing the victim? You weren't pushed out, Meghan. You walked out, and you've been cashing in ever since. The camera zoomed in just as Meghan's first tear fell. Her face twisted with pain and fury. The silence in the room was almost painful. Andy wasn't finished. You're jealous, he said, his voice now quieter but even more piercing. Jealous of William and Kate. Jealous of the respect they've earned, the admiration they receive, the grace they show under the same spotlight you claim nearly destroyed you. The difference is, they chose duty. You chose drama. Meghan shook her head fiercely, her voice cracking. That's not true. That's not fair. Andy didn't blink. Fair? He repeated. Life in the royal family isn't about what's fair. It's about responsibility. And you turned yours into a brand built on complaints, contradictions, and cash. Now the tears were flowing freely. Meghan grabbed at her microphone, struggling to unclip it as her hand trembled. The audience stayed silent, all eyes locked on the moment unfolding in front of them. History, emotion, and confrontation all rolled into one. This is over, Meghan finally said, her voice shaking with rage and embarrassment. I won't sit here and be attacked like this. Andy leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. No, Meghan, he replied, cool and sharp. You're not being attacked. You're being exposed. There's a difference. Meghan stood quickly, ripping the microphone free and dropping it onto the chair with a loud snap. Her heels echoed on the studio floor as she stormed off the set, her back straight, shoulders stiff. The camera followed her until she vanished behind the curtain. Andy turned back to face the cameras and the audience, his face composed. "Well," he said with a quiet finality, "that's one way to end an interview." Half the audience clapped. The other half sat in stunned silence. Everyone in the room knew they had just witnessed one of the most explosive moments in late-night television. Andy straightened his notes, glanced at his half-finished cocktail, and looked into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Meghan Markle. We'll be right back after this." The lights dimmed. The music played. The segment ended, but the fallout was only just beginning. The lights dimmed and the audience buzzed, still trying to process what they had just seen. Meghan was gone. The stage felt colder, quieter, as Andy sat calmly, his expression cool and unchanged. He shuffled his notes, with slow purpose, as if to remind everyone he was still in control. But before signing off, he turned to the camera one last time. "So," he said, his voice even, "did I go too far? Or did Meghan finally face the accountability she's been dodging?" He paused, letting the words settle. "Let me know what you think in the comments below." He gave a small nod to the audience and added, "Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another dramatic moment like this one." The camera zoomed out slightly. The crowd, still recovering from the intensity of the last segment, began to stir again. Applause broke out, mixed, hesitant at first, then louder. The theme music played as the show moved into its outro, but the energy in the room had completely changed. What had started as a regular celebrity interview had turned into something far more powerful, a clash of egos, truths, and reputations. Andy sat back in his chair, adjusting his collar, watching the crew move in the background as the credits began to roll. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had walked into the studio expecting to control the story. Instead, she had been forced to face questions that most interviewers avoided. And when those questions got too sharp, she walked off the set. Whether people saw it as courage or collapse, one thing was clear: this wasn't just another interview. This was a turning point. One that people would be talking about for days, maybe even years. And though Meghan had left the stage, the story was far from over.